Welcome back. You're watching HFO-TV.
Welcome back to HFO-TV. I'm Kirk Douglas, Marketing Director. With me today is Brian Gerritz, President of Pavilion Construction. We're going to be talking a little bit about the city's plans for the future of unreinforced masonry buildings in the city. Thanks for joining me today, Brian.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Look forward to the discussion.
So you read this report, and I feel like there are some things in it that you don't really agree with, or that you have problems with, and I think maybe we should talk about that.
Fantastic. Let's talk about that, because I think priorities for the city right now, when you look at what we're talking about is vulnerable, unreinforced masonry buildings. And there's certainly other jurisdictions along the West Coast, throughout California, Seattle, that have adopted aggressive triggers, mandatory triggers, in which building owners were forced to bring their buildings into the current seismic zoning, or at least make them less vulnerable. For apartment owners today, you know, if you read the statistics and what the city council has chartered here, the city council is operating off of data that is now 20 years old. It's 1995 data, and at that point there were 1,800 buildings.
And they're trying to recount all those buildings by next spring.
By next spring. What they have identified right now is out of the 3 committees they've put together, they've put together a retrofit seismic committee, highly staffed, highly qualified, full of engineers, and that's the first glimpse of what a new policy may look like. Out of the other 2 committees, which one of them is an incentive committee and the other one's a policy committee, we've seen very little. On the engineers, represented by structural engineers, City of Portland building department engineers, they are going all out to make sure that they're on par with the cities in California and the cities of Seattle. And over the course of the next 25 years, Portland will be free from any vulnerable, unreinforced masonry building.
That's their goal.
That's their goal, yeah.
But I noticed that their timeline for upgrading Portland's buildings was much shorter than they had implemented in San Francisco and LA, for example, because they had 7 years, 10 years, and Portland they're saying 20, 25, and an extra 5, up to 30 years if you needed an extension for something.
Correct. Over that timeline, you know, if you look at what's traditionally been in the multifamily model, a multifamily building generally will age to 90 to 100 years.
So are they teardowns by that point? Is that what they're sort of hoping for?
That is a huge piece of this. If you look at ways in which we're going to ignite or stimulate stale parts of the city, and I call them stale because they're East Burnside, they're Sandy Boulevard, they're Southeast Foster, they're probably what's probably the most attention for our policymakers, it's downtown Chinatown. And these buildings that are there, they need to figure out a way to stimulate economic activity. They want redevelopment there. They want density there. And so you have old building owners who are now housing enterprise. There's jobs there. There's renters there. And it's probably being rented at less than market rate for that type of space. We'd like to see those areas redeveloped. Here's a great policy that helps accelerate that redevelopment.
So what you're saying is that it may not actually be about making these buildings safer for people. It may be just that given the alternative of the expense of making them safer for people, they could just be torn down and have new things built there rather than taking out a new loan to retrofit a building that may not last that much longer anyway.
Politics is funny, but absolutely. That's first of all, back up. Absolutely, if we go in and do a structural retrofit, that building is less vulnerable when we leave than it was when we first got there. For multifamily apartment owners, the first cost that they're going to be hit with, and this is for owners that have units of more than 10 units, generally more than 2 stories in height. So we're talking about some prominent downtown properties that have survived several moderate earthquakes. But the first cost they're going to be hit with as soon as they receive a letter from the city, within 3 years, they've got to submit a report back to the city, which is a seismic study. Also, in the current recommendations, this isn't policy, has not been adopted. If they are in a zone of high probability of liquefaction, they will also need to have a geotechnical report done. Now, today's recommendations talk about the geotechnical report being a fact-finding mission to better equip the building owner for decision-making as to whether to tear down or whether to go ahead and retrofit. There's complications that come out of that. A good portion of downtown is, in fact, a high liquefaction area. Has to go way back to the roots of Portland. A lot of that fill that was in the ground is certainly not placed with the rigors and with the oversight it is today. And you're in a high water table. There's liquefaction. So watch for what comes out of the committee's recommendations into policy. And if that really gets a strong play, yes, then it very quickly looks like a redevelopment policy exclusive of our historic structures, because Portland's still in love with brick.
Even if you redevelop property on that same land, it's going to have the same issue with liquefaction. So how would you get around that? Are you saying that if you tear it down, you don't have to do that same study?
No, the study has to be performed regardless. A study has to be done with your existing building. You've got to go investigate the soils underneath it.
So otherwise, if you tear your building down now before this law goes into effect, then you don't have to worry about having that report done.
No, you would do that anyways.
Today you would do that?
Correct. And a lot of the buildings that are being built close to the water, which is where most of our unreinforced masonry buildings are, is in fact, buildings that go back in today, we're driving pile, we're using friction pile, we're using geopiers, we're using all sort of mitigative efforts down underneath the buildings to guard against liquefaction, with new buildings being built today. So the committee providing the recommendations sees that as a way to entice and maybe it's all with honest good intention. Go ahead and get a geotechnical report prior to going out and spending what they have categorized today for a retrofit, which includes shoring up any of your parapet walls, your roof, tying your parapet walls off to your roof. And that is that fix is cheap. That's maybe $20 a square foot. And in fact, most studies have shown out of the seismic events we've had on the West Coast, those parapet walls that are unreinforced have a bad tendency. They're at the top of the structure. They experience the most amplification of the wave, and they fall into the street. They fall into the sidewalk. It also happens to be right at the building entry point or exit point. So that is a cheap fix that most apartment building owners should actually look at doing, regardless of policy. If they've got unreinforced parapet walls, they should look at reinforcing those. Relatively cheap. From there, it gets more involved, and it gets into tying on exterior facades back into the building floors, making sure that the building can handle shear loads is what we get in an earthquake, left and right, and we get uplift. And at that point, the committee currently, and I will qualify for the committee, they ask for additional cost studies and ask for additional dollars from City Council to study costs. But today, on an apartment building that's downtown Portland, above 4 stories in height, they're suggesting it could be as much as $60 per square foot to bring those buildings into compliance.
What do the studies cost that they're asking people to do? Are those prohibitively expensive?
The geotechnical report is probably on an existing building site like this. It's a little bit more challenging, more times involved to actually get to the soils to do your testing. Probably looking at $4,000 to $6,000.
Oh, okay. That's not so bad.
Of the seismic assessment, you're probably just below that. So together, the two reports, I'd be comfortable to say it's probably between $8,000 and $12,000 for the two reports.
If we were to have a magnitude 4 to a 9, for example, what's the best you could hope for as far as building performance, if you do these retrofits.
And the crystal ball. You know,
Right.
there's actually a great study on that. FEMA has studied that. Specific jurisdictions within California have studied that. And there is scientific support for going back and retrofitting these buildings. The best that you can hope for after you retrofit, and we do have a notable seismic event, is that you more than likely will not have a major loss or a catastrophic loss of your asset. Minor loss is still very much going to happen to your building, but we've protected human life by the fact that we don't have falling debris into the street and we don't have floors collapsing on top of each other. Asset-wise, it's really anybody's guess. Each building is going to absolutely respond to an earthquake, very unique unto itself. And in fact, in the Willamette Valley, where we do have a lot of silt lying in the valley, we have amplification waves that can either massively increase the effects of the earthquake at one specific location, or they can cancel each other out. So it's really hard to predict where your property sits when the big one occurs. But what the seismic retrofitting policy is looking to do, it is looking to preserve human life. It is looking to limit the loss of just complete chaos and destruction which follows natural disasters. And it does look to quicken the recovery, the economic recovery of the asset, because all of these things are performing in an economy that we call our community. Mm-hmm. And the quicker that we can put them back to use after an event, the quicker that our community can recover and stand on its own 2 feet.
Do we have the capacity to make all of these upgrades if this law were to pass over the next 15, 20 years? Do we have the capacity within the construction industry to get that done?
We do. And today it's tough to look at. Today we know that demand is through the roof, supply is lagging behind, and supply being skilled labor to construct all of the desires of the developers have for the city. We're in lag. But over the course of 25 years, and the city is giving forethought to that. They're giving forethought to not only construction capacities, but they're also giving forethought to the fact in which these properties are financed. And they're allowing people to forecast build it in. If I was a developer, my property became a mandated property for future retrofit, I would begin to piggy bank money today, and I would wait until a downturn happens in the construction industry where I can leverage my dollars further, and I would go about it then.
If you were one of these apartment owners and you were facing this choice, let's say this ordinance takes effect next year, how would you evaluate whether or not you would implement this, or whether you would just tear down your building and start over?
That's complicated. There's a lot of other factors that have to come into play there. This policy in and of itself should not be a driving factor as to whether or not somebody dispositions themselves from their asset. It should not be a decision standalone. It's over 25 years, so it's not a decision that has to be eminently made. And I think that's really important, because I think part of what the recommendations are coming out is an accelerator. It's a bit of a scare tactic to get people voluntarily to jump into the program today that exists. And it is a voluntary passive program that does exist. Oregon law does have that on the books today. That they want you to go in on rules that you know today and voluntarily do it. And they're hanging some nasty things out beyond that. I think one of the scariest things with the recommendations is the required notification to building tenants. And we don't have that today necessarily with asbestos or other human life-threatening toxins that are in our building. Yet when it comes to seismic, one of the recommendations is if you are in a vulnerable unreinforced masonry building, this new city ordinance could require you as a landlord to notify each and every one of your tenants that they are in a vulnerable unreinforced masonry building. And by that, bringing market pressures to bear with your revenue stream.
Well, thank you so much. That's all the time we have for now. Thanks for watching HFO TV. We'll see you again next time.
Our entire office specializes in multifamily real estate, making HFO the largest multifamily brokerage in the Pacific Northwest. Your success is our passion. Build your legacy with HFO. Call 503-241-5541 or visit our website at hfore.com for more information.